I'm Indy Neidell, and this is Out of the Trenches, where I sit here in the chair of wisdom and answer all your questions about the First World War. Tyler Parker writes, "Hi Indy and crew, question for Out of the Trenches. Given the overwhelming success of the Central Powers at the Battle of Caporetto, could the breakthrough have been potentially exploited better to substantially increase their chances at overall victory? Could Italy have been completely knocked out of the war, and if so, would the subsequent freeing up the stretched thin Austro-Hungarian troops and resources to the Western Front been enough to play a decisive role in the German offensive of 1918? Love your show and keep up the excellent work. Hope you guys keep the content rolling past the war's conclusion to extensively cover the post-war chaos that occurred across much of the globe." Well, I'd love to answer your question, but that's all the time we have for today. No, just kidding. Let's see. Long question. The scale of success at Caporetto was certainly not widely anticipated by Central Powers High Command. It was an operational success that could not be exploited to a complete breakthrough by the forces at hand. The German shock troops were exhausted by the time the Italians had reformed, and the Austro-Hungarians were not prepared for an offensive push. Winter was coming, and most importantly, Italy was not yet out of things. It still had very motivated soldiers behind strong positions on the Piave River, and its allies, France and Britain, were already reinforcing them with men and material. With the state of the Austro-Hungarian armies, Germany would have had to commit a large amount of men to actually break those positions and force Italy to sue for peace. And if Italy would not sue for peace, the Central Powers would not only need a lot of troops to establish a new front line against the British and the French in the west of Italy, but would also need a large amount of soldiers to actually occupy Italy and keep it peaceful. And neither of those was really desirable, nor were they a realistic alternative, especially with the threat of American troops soon coming to Europe. The Germans simply did not have the time to fully commit there. Let's see. Johnny Walker asks, "Can you explain relations between the Ottoman Empire and Bulgaria as Central Powers allies, as you did with Germany and Austria-Hungary? How was public feeling or soldiers' behavior when they met each other about the alliance in both countries, considering it was only recently when they were on opposing sides in the Balkan Wars? So they must be somewhat reserved. Keep up the good work." Okay, thank you. Bulgaria and the Ottoman Empire had actually engaged in secret negotiations in early August in 1914 for an alliance, or at least a pact of mutual support, right? Because both sides were still neutral at that point and promised help in case either country was attacked by a Balkan power. The Ottomans knew that they were bound to Germany and could, or would, not stay out of the war for long, and tried to get the Bulgarians into an alliance against Russia. Now, this failed repeatedly. However, the Bulgarians were open for negotiations for an alliance against either Greece or Serbia. So the high commands from both sides treated each other rather amicably at the beginning. But Bulgaria's main, if not only, real interest in the war was the occupation of Macedonia, and not really to help its allies with their struggles. Ottoman soldiers were allowed to cross Bulgarian territory, sure, but as you mentioned, relations between the two were strained from the Balkan Wars. Bulgarian and Ottoman forces, they did not really want to fight alongside each other, nor did their commanders want that. German Field Marshal August von Mackensen included troops from both nations into his multinational attack force in Romania, yeah, but the Ottoman troops stayed mostly with the Austro-Hungarians and the Bulgarians mostly with the Germans. Sad but true, we don't have access to Bulgarian or Turkish war diaries or personal accounts, really. I mean, it would certainly be interesting to know of such encounters. The German records don't report any noticeable conflict between the two, but if our Bulgarian or Turkish fans know any anecdotes like this, please share it with us in the concepts. In the comments. Share it with us in the concepts. Giuseppe writes, "Hi guys, I have a question. We hear about the Sturmtruppe, the Arditi, and the Jagdkommando, but did the British ever have a special forces element active during World War I? I read that some of the tactics used by the German Sturmtruppe were implemented by the regular British Army during trench raids. However, as far as I'm aware, there was no specific group dedicated to using these tactics. Love the show, love the show. 3 cheers for Indy, 3 cheers for me. Hip hip hurrah, hip hip hurrah, hip hip hurrah. All right, hey Indy, hey. Okay, sometimes it's fun to be me. Well, the British did not have a special force per se compared with, say, the Arditi, the Italian Arditi. The evolution of the British Army was more strongly interconnected with all of its branches. But that doesn't mean that the infantry did not include new tactics like shock or other close combat tactics, as well as new weapons. It did not so much stem from the reaction to the German approach, but from their own experiences of trench raids and combat patrols. The British doctrine of trench warfare was already focused on aggression. Like we said in our episode about snipers, they focused on domination and control of the battlefield. Through experience and sheer necessity, troops who were sent out to raid or storm enemy trenches were equipped with shock equipment. The Mills grenades, the Lewis gun, the Stokes mortar, these were ideal for those quick attacks. There were, though, different units from the United Kingdom as well as from the Dominions that had the reputation of being the equivalent of other nations' elites. Australian or Canadian forces spring to mind. They were often considered shock troops, and even German reports mention their extra aggressiveness and ferociousness. Not to forget the Nepalese Gurkhas fighting in the Middle East. There's still a discussion going on as to why exactly the forces from the Dominions were so suitable for the role of shock troops. It's possible, since those corps were more tightly organized and were led by more insightful officers often, that in return they had more motivated and aggressive soldiers. Maybe. I don't know. We see that on a larger scale in battles like Vimy Ridge and Messines Ridge, where well-prepared and well-organized groups of soldiers overran the Germans using explosive shock tactics. That's my answer. If you'd like to see our special episode about the evolution of British infantry tactics, you can click right here for that. And do not forget to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. See you next time.